Next witness.
The state calls Jeremy McGrath.
I'm sorry, I misread it.
Graf, right over here, please. Face me, raise your right hand. You promise testimony you're about to give will be the truth, and nothing but the truth? If so, say I do. I do. You see? Mr. Jones?
Would you please state your name?
Jeremy McGrath.
Can you pull that microphone up here?
Well, we gotta try it again, then we'll turn it on.
Oh, okay. Or do we need it?
Well, I want to find out if it wasn't the deputy.
Jeremy McGrath.
And can you spell that for the court reporter, please?
JEREMYMCGRATH.
Mr. McGrath, where do you work at?
For Chickasaw Ambulance Service and also Chickasaw County Medical Examiner Investigator.
And what is your job with Chickasaw Ambulance Service?
Paramedic.
What type of training do you have as a paramedic?
College courses through Hawkeye Community College. It's a diploma paramedic program.
How many years have you been in the medical field?
16 and a half years now.
Can you describe your current duties?
I own the ambulance service, so I do management duties and I also respond to medical calls.
So that's your business then?
Correct.
Okay, you also said that you do medical investigations?
Yes.
Okay, explain what that is.
Excuse me, I'm one of the appointed medical examiner investigators for Chickasaw County, so we get called usually by dispatch and go to the scenes of deaths and do preliminary gathering of information for the state medical examiner's office.
So explain that to the jury. You go and get some basic information.
Correct.
Do you put it in some type of report?
Yes, we do a MEI 1 report, which consists of basic demographic information, things that we observe, everything's documented there as far as the condition of the person and the circumstances that we observe. Do kind of some preliminary investigation.
And that information gets sent to the state medical examiner?
Correct.
Right. And what's the state medical examiner?
State medical examiner's office is in Ankeny, and that's where we send people in for autopsies. And
What's your educational background?
I have a 2-year degree in police science, associate's degree, and certificate for paramedic.
The medical examiner investigator, is that volunteer?
We're paid a nominal fee.
All right, I'd like to talk to you about August 30th, 2017. Were you paged out to a residence regarding an infant?
Yes, it was.
What time?
It was approximately 1 o'clock or shortly before 1 p.m.
And were you paged out as the medical examiner investigator or through your ambulance service?
It's an ambulance and first responder.
So tell us what you did when you received the call.
We were paged for a child not breathing, and so I heard the page, and I was actually north of New Hampton, and we were paged to a residence in Alta Vista, Iowa, and so I jumped in my truck and responded with my lights activated.
You say you were north of New Hampton, so does that put you closer to Alta Vista if you were south of New Hampton?
Correct.
Okay. How long did it take you to get there?
I would say approximately 12 minutes.
Where did you go to?
The apartment, Hilltop Avenue, I believe, in Alta Vista.
Was that apartment number 7?
Yes.
What did you do when you arrived at the apartment?
When I pulled up to the residence, I was greeted by a postal worker, and she directed me, just directed me to the residence.
Did you know who that was?
I did not.
All right, so what did you do?
I entered the residence. There was nobody in the kitchen or living area as I walked through the residence. I witnessed adult female and adult male and a young child in the bedroom to the left, which is on the north side of the apartment. And one of our other first responders was in the bedroom directly in front of me on the east side of the apartment.
Did you know the adult male and female? Have you seen them before?
No, ma'am.
What were they doing in the room?
Talking.
And you said there was a young child in there as well?
Yes, ma'am.
How close was that, the bedroom that those two adults were in, how close is that to the bedroom that your first responder, Tony, was in?
A few feet.
Right beside each other?
Doorway to doorway, yes.
So did you go in to the baby's room?
Yes.
What did you do?
I was greeted by the first responder that was there. She kind of briefed me real quickly. Obviously, I've seen an infant in the swing, and she was standing there, and she briefed me on the circumstances that she had seen, and I did an assessment of my own.
And the first responder, that was Tony Friedrich, correct?
Correct.
Did you notice any smell when you were in the room?
Yes, there was an odor, one that I do not recognize. I've been on numerous calls where somebody had been deceased, and there's a certain odor, and this wasn't it. It's an odor that was difficult to describe.
Did you end up filling out a report for the state medical examiner's office?
Yes, I did.
One of the things that Ms. Friedrich talked about earlier was rigor. Is that something that you, as the medical examiner investigator, was looking at?
Yes.
What did you find in regards to rigor with the baby?
What I found was the rigor was present. As I lifted the baby's arm to assess it, or him, it was stiff.
And when you wrote your report, are there different levels of rigor?
Yes.
Tell us what those levels are.
They determine it by 0, 1, 2, and 3. 0 being no rigor, 3 being full rigor.
What did you put in your report for the state medical examiner?
3.
All right, did the child have blankets covering it?
Yes.
Did you touch them?
Yes.
And what did they feel like?
Wet.
Was there anything else unusual that you saw around the child?
I noticed flies and gnats.
And I assume that there was no medical intervention attempted with the baby.
Correct.
How long did you end up staying at the scene?
Approximately 2 to 3 hours.
That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Cross.
From your observations of the child, were you able to determine the time of death?
No, sir.
And did you observe any decomposition?
No, sir.
Nothing was consistent of the child being deceased for all years.
I can't determine that.
Nothing further.
Redirect.
No.
You may step down and this witness be excused.
Yes.
Next witness.
Your Honor, statement called Sheriff Martin Keeman.
Sheriff, raise your right hand. You promise testimony you're about to give will be the truth and nothing but the truth. And if so, say I do. I do. Be seated. Thank you. Mr. Kelsey.
Thank you. Sheriff, if you could please state your first and last name and spell them both for the record.
Yes, Martin Heeman, M-A-R-T-I-N-H-E-M-A-N-N.
And sir, you are the sheriff in and for Chickasaw County, Iowa, correct?
Yes, I am.
Can you describe to the jury your educational background that qualified you to be the sheriff?
Yes, I attended a police science course of 2 years in which I received a Associate of Applied Arts degree. That would have been in 1988. And then also later in 1988, I had attended the Iowa Law Enforcement Academy. And over the last 30 years, I've attended numerous other law enforcement related training.
And sir, how many years total in law enforcement have you served?
It would be a little over 30 years now.
And how many years total have you served with the Chickasaw County Sheriff's Office?
28 years.
And what positions have you held in addition to sheriff in the past in your 28 years with the Chickasaw County Sheriff's Office?
1990, I was hired as a deputy sheriff. In 2012, I was appointed chief deputy. And 2013, I was also made the jail administrator before being elected in 2016.
And so how large back on August 30th, 2017 was the Chickasaw County Sheriff's Department? How many officers did you have?
We would have had a total of 9 officers in our department, including myself.
And what does it mean to be a sheriff? What are your duties, sir?
Pretty much everything, from administration to doing a budget, to attending board meetings, to attending city council meetings, to handling calls. So we wear a lot of different hats. The sheriff is not included, especially in small departments such as Chickasaw County.
So you were more than just an administrator, you actually went out and handled calls?
Yes.
In fact, sir, you were working on August 30th, 2017, correct?
Yes.
Did you handle a call that day, you dispatched to a call to Alta Vista?
Yes, I did respond to a call in Alta Vista.
And why was it, sir, that you responded as sheriff to this call?
Well, again, in a small department, depending on the severity of the crime, everybody's going to respond, not just one of the deputies. Again, the nature of the call that I was given, I felt that this was something that not just one deputy by himself should handle.
And sir, when you received the call about the incident in Alta Vista, where were you physically located?
I was sitting at the sheriff's office when the call came in.
And did you in fact go to Alta Vista?
I did.
Were you familiar with that apartment complex prior to that day?
Yes, I was.
I assume in over 30 years you're probably familiar with every building in Chickasaw County, aren't you?
Just about.
Okay. And sir, how about the defendant, Zachary Koehn? Did you know him prior to August 30th of 2017?
No, I'd never met him prior to that date.
How about his living girlfriend, Cheyanne Harris? Did you know her?
I did not know her either.
How about the defendant's baby, Sterling Koehn? Did you know him?
I did not know him.
Or his daughter, Nala?
I did not know her.
Now, your report said you arrived at the apartment complex at about 1:14 p.m. Would that be accurate?
Yes, it would be.
When you arrived, what did you see, sir?
I arrived and the first person that I had seen approaching my vehicle would have been a person by the name of Kevin, commonly sometimes known as Boomer, that's his nickname, Kevin Hupka.
And what position does Mr. Hupka hold?
He is the fire chief of the Alta Vista Fire Department.
Okay, and what was his role?
He was responding, he had heard something come across his radio or his scanner, and so he was responding as a first responder.
And did he direct you to the appropriate apartment?
Yes, he did.
And did you go into the building?
Yes, I did.
And did you go up to the apartment?
Yes.
What was your observation, what did you see when you went into the apartment?
When I first went into the apartment, there would have been Chief Deputy Reed Palo on our department that was inside the door to the right, and he was kind of crouched down speaking with who was identified as Cheyanne Harris.
Did you have interaction in that apartment with the defendant, Mr. Koehn?
I did.
Where did that interaction occur?
That would have been in a northeast bedroom located in that apartment.
Would that have been the other bedroom in this home?
Yes.
And in that bedroom was who?
Was Mr. Koehn, and then also his daughter, Nala.
And sir, when you were working that day, were you equipped with a body camera?
Yes, I was.
How does that work?
It is a camera that we put on our cells, and I think on that day I had it located somewhere, on my chest. And it is activated just simply by pressing a record button, and it'll pick up both audio and visual as well.
Did you have an interaction with the defendant in that bedroom on August 30th, 2017, shortly after you arrived?
Yes, I did.
Was that interaction captured on your body camera?
Yes, it was.
Have you had a chance to review State's Exhibit number 36, which is a 10-minute recording of your interaction with the defendant?
Yes, I have reviewed it.
And did it accurately reflect your conversation with the defendant in that bedroom?
Yes, it did.
Your Honor, I move to the admission of State's Exhibit number 36.
Any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
Submitted.
Your Honor, I'd ask for permission to publish. I'd also waive a recording by the court reporter of the contents of Exhibit 36.
No objection.
Do we actually have, we don't have, no, do you have the DVD you're going to submit?
Yes.
Okay. And do you also have a recording or DVD recording of the 911 as well?
Yes, that's been admitted. The court reporter has it, Your Honor.
Okay, and you give her a copy of this one as well?
I will, yes, sir.
All right. Well, I am going to reposition myself because it will be my only opportunity to watch it.
And sir, if I could plead with the court to turn the air picture off so we can hear better.
Leave it to the jury, then.
I promise it's only 10 minutes long.
Okay. Do you want the lights down as well?
No, I think we're good.
Okay.
Zach. Can't write clothes on Zach. So I'm just going to take a knee here, Zach. So you said Zach? Yeah. Short for Zachary or Zachariah? Zachary. Z-A-C-H. Yeah. What's your middle name, Zach? Paul. Last name? King. King? K-O-E-H-N. K-O-E-H-N. What's your date of birth, Zach? 10/6/89. Okay. Do you live here, Zach? Yes. What's this address here? 107 South Hilltop. Alta Vista, Apartment 7. Apartment 7. How long have you lived here, Zach? Since May. May of this year? No, like in June. I had a contract. Okay. So May or June? Yeah. And who else lives here then? Just me and her and the kids. Okay. What is it your girlfriend or wife? Girlfriend. What's her name?
Cheyanne Harris.
Cheyenne.
Yeah, with the A.
Could you spell
C-H-E-Y-A-N-N-E.
Cheyanne?
Harris.
Harris.
R-I-S.
Do you know when her date of birth is at all?
2/17/97.
97?
Yeah.
Okay. And has Cheyenne also, did she move in here in either May or June also at the same time? Okay. And then, is this your daughter then here?
Yes.
What's her name?
Nolan Renee.
Could you spell that?
N-A-L-A.
N-A-L-A, Renee?
Yes.
How do you spell Renee?
R-E-N.
A-E or E-E?
A-E.
And her last name?
King.
K-O-E-H-N. What's her date of birth?
November 8, 2015.
Okay. And then, you have another daughter then?
That was our son.
Or your son? Okay. What is his name?
Sterling Daniel.
Sterling, S-T,
E-R-I. L. That'd be just the I. L. Sterling Silver.
S-T-E-R-L-I-N-G. And his middle name?
Daniel.
King.
Yes.
What was his date of birth?
May 1st of this year.
Okay. And do you or Cheyenne work at all?
I do.
Okay. And where do you work at, Zach?
I work for the Nuggets LLC.
Okay. Nugent?
Yeah, Ted Nugent. And Nuggets. Drive truck.
Okay. When did you last work?
Last night.
Okay.
And work nights.
So then, last night, what hours did you work then?
I left at Charles Street about 6 o'clock.
6 p.m.
Yeah. And then I went to West Bend, Iowa. Really didn't. I got back at about 3 or 4.
Got back to Charles City
Yeah.
about 3:34. And then you drive then back from Charles City to here then. So you would have got back here.
Probably 4:30 or so.
Okay.
When I got home, I didn't crash. It was nighttime.
Yeah, exactly.
And she come in and looked me up and said he was gone.
Okay. Cheyenne did.
Yeah. So I got on the phone and called y'all's right away. So I was a little disorientated and then woke up and told my son's dead. It's
Okay.
still hard to believe.
Does Cheyenne work at all then? Okay.
She stayed home.
So she stayed at home with the kids then, you were sleeping then this morning?
Yeah.
Okay. So Sterling, have you had any, was it a normal delivery and everything, or was there any complications?
I delivered him
Oh, you delivered him?
in the rice field and the ambulance come
Okay.
and they took him him in that, put her in that tub with the warm water and delivered her.
Okay. So then where did she go to the hospital then? Was it Cresco Hospital then? Okay.
Cameron was her doctor.
Who?
Dr. Cameron.
Cameron. Okay. And there was no issues, or the doctors didn't say there was anything wrong. So a couple days later, then he came home. Has he been a healthy boy then since then?
He didn't seem to gain weight very much, but
Okay.
he would eat just terribly much at a time.
Sure. Okay. Sleeping okay? Okay. He's not on any medications or anything like that. Okay. All right. Okay. Any other family? Do you or Cheyenne have any other family?
She has, her parents live in Riceville,
Okay.
but they're living kind of EMD.
So the relationship isn't the best between Cheyenne and her parents then? Okay.
My parents live in Oklahoma.
Okay. How long? Go ahead.
My cousin, he's on his way over here.
From where?
He lives over by Leroy.
Leroy, Minnesota? Okay.
I drive a truck with him, actually.
Okay. And that was a cousin, you said?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So you're originally from Oklahoma then?
I'm originally from California.
Okay. How long have you been in Iowa then?
Almost 26 years.
Okay, sure.
Been a while.
Okay. All right. Okay. Well, I haven't been in the other room where Daniel's at or anything. So, I can tell you we're just going to have to, figure out exactly what happened here and stuff, okay?
I understand.
So.
I was having a cigarette.
Yeah, just kind of stick around here and stuff so that if we have any questions for you that we can,
I'll just be right outside the door.
yeah.
Proceed.
Thank you. Sheriff, we just saw case exhibit number 36, that 10-minute interview that you had with the defendant in his bedroom, correct?
Yes.
Prior to interviewing the defendant in that bedroom, had you gone back in the room where Sterling was at?
No.
Is it fair to say that you did not know the condition of Sterling or the swing or his body or clothing at that time?
Only thing that I was told, and that was when I first arrived, is that he or she was gone. So that's really all that I knew at that point.
So you didn't know the details of what his condition of his body or the clothing of the swing were, correct?
That is correct.
You mentioned in the interview that it was hard to write with gloves on. Did you have gloves on?
I did.
So that was you were talking about?
Yes.
Okay, all right. And the girl, Nala, that the defendant talked about, was it your understanding that it was Nala that was sitting on the defendant's lap?
Yes.
Did she appear to be properly clothed?
Yes.
Did she appear to be properly nourished?
Yes.
Did you notice anything about her that seemed to be amiss?
No.
Now, the defendant told you that he was born on October 6, 1989, correct?
Yes.
Would that have made him 27 years of age at the time that you were at the apartment?
Yes.
Now, sir, are you aware that after your interaction with Mr. Koehn in that room, that he was later interviewed at greater length and in more depth by the DCI agent, Special Agent Turner? Are you aware of that?
Yes, I am.
Did you consider your interview an in-depth sit-down interview with Mr. Koehn?
I didn't consider it in-depth. It was basically to find out his name, date of birth, is that where he lived, does he work, things like that. I didn't go into any further detail about, you know, Sterling or anybody else. Or,
And it's fair to say that you really didn't know what was going on in that back bedroom, did you?
no.
Now, sir, were you responsible with other officers after your interaction with Mr. Koehn to provide security for the apartment?
Yes.
And why was it important to provide security for the apartment?
We wanted to make sure that if it was determined that it was a possible crime scene, that it be protected, that nothing more go in or out of the place, and that nothing else be disturbed.
Did you secure the integrity of that crime scene until Special Agent Teal arrived at about 6:30 p.m. that evening?
Yes, I did.
Did that pretty much end your involvement in this investigation?
Yes, it did.
So that's all the questions I have. Thank you.
Cross?
Sheriff Koehn, am I pronouncing that correctly?
Yes, you are.
Sure. And I know we have to watch the video, but you were actually seeing.
Yes.
Was Zachary retired?
Yes, I think that would be a fair assessment.
He was quiet, wasn't he?
Yes, he was.
And I think you described him at one point as being somber.
Yes.
Anything else?
No, sir?
This witness be excused.
Yes, Your Honor.
You are excused.
Thank you.
Next witness.
State calls Deputy Reed Kayla.
If you raise your right hand, you promise testimony you're about to give will be the truth and nothing but the truth. If so, say I do. I do. And that microphone is on. If you want to pull the other one.
This one, yeah. I'm going to leave it out there.
I think it's your radio or something.
My radio's off.
We're good. Okay.
Can you state your name, please?
I'm Reed Palo.
Where do you work?
I work for the Chickasaw County Sheriff's Office.
And how long have you been there?
I began with the Chickasaw County Sheriff's Office in June of 2001.
How many years have you been in law enforcement?
As a full-time officer in the state of Iowa, 21 years.
Where did you work at prior to Chickasaw County?
I worked as a reserve police officer from the 80s and 90s in the Twin Cities area and in Duluth, Minnesota. I also worked, my real job was working as a counselor in a group home in the Duluth area. And before that, I worked in detox in Minneapolis, in a detoxification center as a chemical dependency technician.
And what's your title at the Chickasaw County Sheriff's Office?
I'm the chief deputy.
How long have you held that position?
Officially, it's been about 4 years.
You say it officially.
We went through a process where our sheriff had retired, and we were appointed to our positions. And then at the beginning of the last executive term would have been when it became more official. So,
What kind of hours do you work?
my general scheduled shift is I work days, usually from 7 o'clock in the morning till 4 in the afternoon, depending on what our needs are. It's difficult to predict, really.
And what's your educational background?
I went to school in the Twin Cities area for law enforcement, Golden Valley Lutheran College, and then some community colleges, and I was enrolled in the skills program in Minnesota when I accepted a position in Iowa for the city of Cresco. Went to the academy, ILEA Academy.
When did you go to the ILEA Academy?
That would have been 98.
And you're a certified police officer in the state of Iowa?
I am a certified officer and have been since.
Do you normally head up most of the major investigations within your department?
When I was with Cresco, I went through several additional schools and additional training in the areas of investigations, and have worked general criminal investigation since I've come to Chickasaw County. That was part of what I was hired for. The sheriff at the time knew me from some of the joint investigations that I'd worked with a task force that involved both of our counties, and that was a big part of why I came to Chickasaw.
So tell us a little bit about Chickasaw County. It is rural.
We are very rural.
Approximately, what's the population of Chickasaw County as a whole?
A little over 12,000. So
And the county seat,
would be New Hampton.
how big is that?
I believe it's about 4,500.
Is that the largest city in your
Yes.
county? Yes.
Yes, it is.
All right, I'd like to talk to you about August 30th, 2017. You were working that day?
I was.
What day of the week was that?
It's a Wednesday.
Or a Tuesday?
Is it a Tuesday?
I'll have to check.
I believe it was Wednesday, actually. The 30th was on a Wednesday. And I was...
It was a Wednesday.
Okay.
Did you overhear a 911 call that came in?
I did. I just left the county attorney's office that day. So I was actually north. Our county attorney's office is just north of New Hampton. And I just was pulling out of their driveway when I heard the page. And that's where I was located.
So what did you do?
Well, I drove to Alta Vista. Alta Vista is a ways from where I was at. It's up in the northwest corner of our county, so it's a haul. And given the nature of the call, I probably operated my vehicle at or near its mechanical limit from the county attorney's office to Alta Vista.
Do you know about what time you arrived?
It took me about 7.5 minutes, so 1:04 p.m.
And you went to 107 South Hilltop in Alta Vista, correct?
Yes.
And that's in Chickasaw County?
Yes, it is.
When you pulled into the apartment complex, first of all, what did you see?
Well, when I pulled in, the apartment is accessed through an alleyway with parking right off the alley. And so I parked at the far end of that parking area. We generally do this to allow ambulances or other emergency medical crew to arrive and give them space to pull in. So I parked kind of away from the apartments, but at the edge of the parking area there.
And you did what then?
I ran around the building. There's 3 apartment buildings, and I ran up to that parking area, and I was met by a lady who directed me. I think I asked her, where are they? And she directed me to the apartment that I was heading to.
So you went into the apartment?
I did.
Who was there when you went in?
As I made entry to the apartment, the fire chief up there was coming out of the back bedroom, and I met him coming through the apartment area, and he directed me back to the bedroom on the right as I went in. Also present was Zach and Cheyanne, and a rural mail carrier, Tina Shoddock, was also present. She was with them just outside of that room. And then I went into the bedroom, and Jeremy McGrath, our medical examiner investigator, and he owns the ambulance service, and he's a first responder as well. He was there, and then Tony Frederick was in there as well.
When you walked into the apartment, what was the first thing that you noticed?
The odor.
What did you smell?
When I came in off the hallway, it was a strong odor of dirty diapers, filth, and urine, which isn't, it was just a stronger odor than I'm used to in my experience.
When When you walked into the back bedroom where Sterling was, what did it feel like?
Well, I have to say the odor magnified. It got, the further I went into the apartment, it was like I was being met with a stronger concentration of that odor. It became pretty, it was almost overwhelming once I got into the bedroom, and it was stale. The air wasn't moving in there, it was just like really still.
All right, and the jury's already seen and heard descriptions of what Sterling looked like, so we won't so much go through that. But did you speak with the first responders?
I did. What I had expected to find was them working on a patient potentially, and they were both standing there just looking down at the swing that was in the room, and they were taking no efforts at resuscitation.
Did they provide you their assessment of the situation?
They're both,
So yes or no?
It's a yes or no?
yes.
Based on the assessment of the situation that you were provided, did you instruct them to do anything or not do anything?
I specifically told them not to touch anything and just to stand by.
And did you have them stay there with Sterling then?
I actually had Tony stay right there. I told her not to touch anything.
And why did you do that?
Wanted to maintain somebody there that I could trust, that I would be able to assure myself that we weren't going to lose evidence or something was going to change.
And I assume you knew Tony Friedrich from previous interactions.
Yes.
You asked Tony to stay with the baby. Where did you go?
I went to speak with the parents to try and determine what had happened.
So where did you go in the apartment to speak with them?
As I turned around, we went into their bedroom, which was the room where Sterling was found was to the right, and their bedroom was to the left.
When you left Sterling's room, how many steps did it take for you to get to their bedroom?
It's hardly even a step. It's the doors are, like this. You'd step out of one door and into the next.
All right, so you went in their bedroom, and what did you do?
I asked them for identification, and I asked them what had been going on.
Did you speak directly with the defendant, Zachary Koehn?
I did.
When you started to speak with him, what did he initially state to you?
He said he was in shock.
Did he provide you his name?
Yes.
Did he provide you who the name of the mother of the child was?
Yes.
And who was that?
Cheyanne Harris.
Did you ask the defendant about the young child, older child that was in the home?
Yes.
And what did he say about that?
He said Nala was his child, and they gave me her date of birth as well.
And about how old was Nala?
20 months.
Were you around Nala at all when you were there?
Yes.
What was her appearance like?
It appeared to be an average, normal, near 2-year-old toddler walking.
Was there anything about her appearance that concerned you or seemed unhealthy or anything like that?
No.
And was Nala able to speak in the sense of speak to where she could say what she saw happen or anything like that?
I really didn't attempt to talk with her, and I didn't really observe her talking at that time. It was not something I had taken any time to really explore either.
And did they tell you, did the defendant identify who the baby in the other room was?
Yes.
And who did he identify him as?
Sterling Koehn.
What was the actions of the parents when you were speaking with them? What was their demeanor like?
Zach was remarkably stoic or emotionless, or very little emotion showing. Cheyanne was upset and was obviously crying. Zach had told me that he worked and she woke him up and told him that he had passed, or he was gone.
Did you continue to speak with the two of them, or did you separate them?
Actually, I asked to talk with Cheyanne separately.
Where did you take her?
Well, initially, we went to the next room, the living room area. There was a chair there. But as I was trying to speak with her, there were people coming and going, and it was pretty chaotic. So I asked if she didn't mind coming out, and we went out and sat in my truck. I have a unmarked pickup truck for a squad car.
And how long did you speak with Cheyanne in the truck?
I'm not sure the actual length of that interview, maybe half an hour, 20 minutes.
After speaking with Cheyanne, what did you do?
Made contact with the Department of Human Services just to inform them of what we had, and also contacted the Department of Criminal Investigations, the DCI, for assistance.
Explain to us the DCI and how that works. How do they get involved with your county cases?
As I mentioned before, we're a rural county, and my staff of sworn officers is only 9 people. And when you have a case come up and the pieces aren't, when it's looking like it's going to take a lot more investigation than what we're able to just do, the DCI is a great resource of agents that can help follow up with interviews and stuff that we couldn't really keep up with or be able to throw the effort into that.
And you made that decision to call the DCI then?
Yes.
Right, at this point, when you were talking with Cheyanne, was security being maintained at the apartment then?
Yes. Deputy Rossell had arrived, and our Sheriff Heeman had also arrived. And I told them to maintain custody on the apartment and maintain security.
So after speaking with Cheyanne, did you take a few minutes to speak with the defendant?
I did. I brought her back over there, and then I took Zach, and we went to talk for a little bit. At that time, I had called into the DCI. They called me back. We talked briefly. Zach and I talked briefly.
Where did you speak with him at?
In my truck as well.
Did you get any type of employment history?
I did. I asked him what their life was like, or how their work arrangement was. Zach explained he worked for Nugent's Nuggets out of, I think they're out of Iowa Falls, but he actually drives truck out of Charles City.
And how far is Charles City from Alta Vista?
It's probably 15 miles. I'm not exactly certain on that, but
Did the defendant tell you how many children he had?
he explained that he had one older son, Caden, who wasn't in their care, and then Nala, the girl that was with him there, and then Sterling.
Where was Caden?
Caden, Zach explained that Caden was being cared for by Zach's parents in Oklahoma, I believe. That he wanted them to attend a Mennonite school and be raised in that capacity. So
What did he say about his relationship with Cheyanne?
they've been together for 3 years or so, and had met when they were in Riceville. Cheyanne was living in Riceville, and he had moved there. He said that they had moved in together a couple months earlier after Sterling was born into Alta Vista because it was closer to where he was trucking.
Now, had they lived together previously in Riceville?
They did live together in Riceville.
And where is Riceville located to Alta Vista?
Riceville is about 10, 12 miles northwest of there.
Did the defendant describe his work schedule at all to you?
He did. I actually went a step further. I'd asked him about his work schedule, and he actually emailed or texted me pictures of his work schedule, or the actual work schedule files.
And generally, what was his work schedule?
Usually he'd go to work in the evenings, 5, 6 o'clock at night, and then be home early morning hours.
Now, while you were in the truck talking with the defendant, did you receive a call back from the DCI?
I did.
And who was that call from?
I believe the call was from John Turbot. I had initially called one of the agents that I was working with on another case, and they were in an area investigators meeting at the time I called in, and then one of them called me back after they kind of made some decisions as to who they were going to send up to assist. And I think it was John Turbot, or it may have been Jim Thiel. I'm not 100% on that.
After having that conversation with DCI though, was there something said in that conversation that made you change course a little bit with what you were doing?
Yeah, after taking a moment to think about what we were observing, the conversation, we decided that it might be best to have Cheyanne and Zach come to the sheriff's office to talk further and to give us a chance to meet with them there. So I ended my conversation with Zach at that point, and then I asked them if they would be willing to come down to the sheriff's office to talk further.
And were they willing to do so?
They were. Zach needed money for gas, so I gave him some cash to be able to put some gas in his car to be able to get down to the sheriff's office.
Were any arrangements made before the defendant Cheyanne left? Were any arrangements made for knowledge?
Yeah, the Cheyanne, we had talked to the same lady that actually directed me to the apartment initially, Jennifer Shriver, is in the next building over, same complex. Nala was going to stay with her for the evening while they were coming to talk to us.
So about what time did the defendant and Cheyanne leave the apartment from?
It was shortly after that conversation. I'm sorry, I don't know the exact time.
That's fine. What did you do after they left?
I met briefly with Sheriff Heeman and Deputy Rossell. I also spoke with Jeremy and the medical examiner, Dr. Luke Brinkman.
You had said that you had called DHS, Department of Human Services, correct?
I did.
And why did you do that?
Well, we had the death of an infant, and that's something you need to report right away. I also had my concerns, not knowing the cause of death of Sterling. I had deep concerns about the care and safety of Nala. Nala was only 20 months old, and so my intent at that point was to facilitate getting her placed somewhere safe until we could determine what was going on here.
Did you remain at the scene for some time after the defendant had left?
A short period of time just to accomplish those things. I also received some written statements and talked with some other witnesses.
So what did you do then?
Then I went to New Hampton and met with agents Chris Calloway and John Turbot, and I believe Jim Thiel.
When you went back to the sheriff's office, first of all, is the sheriff's office in New Hampton?
It is.
When you went back there, was the defendant Cheyanne at the sheriff's office yet?
They had not yet arrived.
So you sit and brief the agents?
I had an opportunity to explain what we had observed so far and strategize how we were going to get the interviews done. And
At some point, did the defendant Cheyanne arrive at the sheriff's office?
they did.
Who ended up interviewing them?
John Turbot interviewed Zach in our interview room, and Chris Calloway interviewed Cheyanne in his vehicle.
Now, while those two were being interviewed, what were you doing?
I assisted Agent Thiel in writing a search warrant for the residence and the vehicle.
And tell us what you mean by a search warrant.
Whenever we have an investigation, we need to ask the court's permission to search, just to make sure that we're doing everything correctly. We wanted to have the court's permission to be able to go and look for evidence and try and sort through how Sterling had passed away.
Did you work on the search warrant with anyone?
With Agent Thiel.
Was the warrant approved?
It was.
What did you do then?
We returned to the residence.
Before you returned to the residence, did you do anything with the defendant's car at the sheriff's office?
I did. Part of the search warrant was for the defendant's vehicle, and we just went ahead and did that search right there at the sheriff's office where it was parked.
What kind of car was it?
It's a Buick Century, I believe, purple.
And whose name was the car registered to?
I don't recall. It was one or both of the defendants, I'm not sure. Or one of them, if it was Zach or Cheyanne, I can't recall.
And do you know, was there anything of interest that was found in the car?
Well, there was a car seat, like a large car seat. I think in my report I referred to it as a toddler car seat. It was a front-facing, pretty good-sized seat. Would never have been appropriate for an infant. And then there were two big tires, or not big, but two spare tires in the back seat, wedged between the front and back seat and the door in the car seat. So there's really no room for anything much else in there. A bunch of garbage, adult food, empty chips bags and other trash. There was no other car seat, or it didn't look like there would be anywhere to put an infant car seat in the vehicle with.
So if somebody wanted to put an infant car seat in there, you couldn't do that because of the tires in the back?
But you couldn't put it in the back for sure.
And the other seat you saw seemed to be a front-facing toddler seat.
Correct.
Did you see anything else in the car, like child toys or anything like that? Anything to do with an infant?
No infant paraphernalia, nothing that you'd expect to see, like bottles or small diapers or wipes or.
All right, so did you also speak with DHS again while you were at the sheriff's office?
I did.
And was there any decisions made at that time regarding NALA?
Yes, we had made the decision to do a law enforcement emergency removal pending determinations on the case. And I worked with DHS. They were going to line up foster care if they could locally, and they were able to do that.
So Nala was placed in foster care that night?
She was.
You went back to the apartments. What did you do then?
We went back to the apartments, and actually by the time I had stayed to search the car and Agent Thiel had gone on ahead, he had called and asked me to stop at the store and pick up a thermometer, which I did.
Do you know about what time you made it back to the apartments that night?
I'm sorry, I don't have the times in front of me.
When you arrived at the apartments, what did you do?
I assisted in evaluating how we were going to best do the search or finish the search. They'd already started working on that. I really didn't do much of the search. What my purpose there was to try and figure out how to get Sterling and evidence to the medical examiner's lab the best way we could. So we made the decision to disassemble the swing and leave his body in the swing as it was found and load that whole swing assembly up into a body bag and seal it there.
What made you decide to do that?
In my training experience, every time we can preserve as much evidence or send as much to the lab as possible, it's going to give them the best view of what we saw, so they can have the most information and preserve as much of the evidence that was there. So we decided that there was nothing stopping us from bringing this whole assembly down there. So we disconnected there was a point where you could take a bolt out to take the swing off of the apparatus that held it. And so we took that, kept him in situ, in the same situation he was in, loaded that in the body bag, and I carried that body bag out, placed it in the van for transport after it was sealed. And then I went back in and I actually took the stand and I took that, tagged it, and then I brought that to the lab as well. So that if he wanted me, I could set it up and show him exactly how he was sitting.
Where's the lab at?
In Ankeny, Iowa?
That night, were you provided a time to be in Ankeny the next day for an autopsy?
Yes, they had scheduled the autopsy for 8 a.m. the next morning. So after getting Sterling loaded up and on his way and taking that swing, I left to go and try and get some sleep. It had been a long day.
All right, let's talk about the autopsy a little bit. You went to Ankeny the next day, we're on August 31st, 2017, correct?
Correct.
When you arrived, was Sterling still in the body bag?
Yes, he was. Actually, our plan had worked. He looked pretty much exactly how he was seated when we loaded him into the bag. I explained to the transporter how we wanted to keep the bag positioned and everything so it wouldn't move around. And when I arrived at the lab, the body bag had been placed on the counter and opened, and he was exactly as we placed him in there.
Did you end up doing anything prior to starting the autopsy to set this one up?
Yes. I spoke with the examiners and the staff, and I explained what we had done, and that I had brought the step thing, the apparatus with me, and I asked if they wanted me to bring that in and set it up as it was, and that's what we decided to do. So I brought it in and set it up just like how we found it.
Go turn that off.
Sorry.
It's not your fault. Proceed.
And you say you set it up, did the medical examiner and his assistants then take some time observing that and as part of getting prepared for the autopsy?
Yes, they did. They looked at it. We, had it set up exactly as it was. I explained to them what our observations were at the scene and how, and they were able to see it pretty much exactly how we saw it.
I assume at some point then the autopsy started.
Yes,
At this point, I assume you're just there.
correct.
Were you present when blankets and clothing were taken off of Sterling in that swing?
I was.
Can you tell us what you saw?
So they started out by there was a quilt over his lap. Started out by taking that quilt off. And we took each article out, and it was evaluated and photographed. There was a number of articles of clothing in like strata, like layers as you went down into the chair. When we took the quilt off, we observed back at the residence, I'd seen black flies, little small gnat-like flies, but here at the lab, we actually observed what appeared to be maggots or tiny little larvae. They looked like waxworms to me, but I know that's not what they were. They were much smaller than that, but they were moving on the skin and in the articles of cloth that we were taking out of the swing.
How many layers did you take off of Sterling?
Well, there was the quilt, then there was a hoodie, and then there was a shirt.
What do you mean a hoodie?
It was like a coat, like a garment it would be for a larger kid, though. It would never fit an infant, but it was a larger, like a coat with a hood on it, kind of a thing.
So we have a quilt.
And then there was socks and some of those like baby hand cover things that were stuffed down in there. I don't remember the exact number of all the articles of clothing, but
You say stuff down in there, what do you mean?
it was all saturated and discolored, and kind of a brown liquid had permeated all of the cloth and the fabrics, and it was like, you'd have stuff on top and stuff stuffed around the child.
Through each layer then, were you continuing to observe the bugs and the maggots?
What I had observed was that the maggots were different colors, and there were some that were further away from the body, and then some that were right on the body that were actually still moving. So yeah, as we got down to Sterling, he was wearing a onesie with some pants.
When you got down to Sterling, what did he have on?
It was just a onesie that he had some blood on his mouth, or some, like a dark substance on his mouth, and on this onesie, but it was like stiff. Like if you touched one corner of it, the whole thing would move. And then that was into these pants.
When you were taking off these layers, what was the smell like?
I didn't think it could get much worse than it was in the apartment the day before, but it was an acrid, rancid. I've been around dead bodies, and it was different than just decomposition. It kind of was like an acidic. I can't. It's just. It was really foul. I mean, it was. I'll never forget that smell.
When Sterling's clothes were removed from his body, did you continue to see the maggots on his skin?
There was some. Yes,
Did he have a diaper on?
he did.
What did that look like?
It was apparent that there was feces and urine that had been straining through the diaper for a long time, and it was where the diaper contacted the skin, it had compressed the skin. It was definite indents, and as the diaper came off, you'd see the skin had broken down, and even as dirty as it was hard to actually see the skin surface because of the feces and everything else that was there. But you could see that the skin had broken down, and the legs and the waist where the diaper actually contacted was compressed, and it just looked like it had been on there a long time.
Once all of his clothing was removed, what was his overall appearance?
I was startled by how tiny, how small he appeared to me. Now, I'm not a doctor, but you could see every rib. And it was just very skinny arms and legs. Didn't look at all normal, like what you'd expect to see with a baby. And he looked bad before we got the clothing off and stuff, but once we got down, it's really small.
We'll take our mid-afternoon recess at this time and resume approximately 10 after 3. Ladies and gentlemen, please continue to heed the admonition given.
All rise for the jury. All rise for the jury.
Be seated. Proceed, Mr.
Following the autopsy, did you continue to do any follow-up work?
Yes, when I say we, myself and other agents spoke with everybody from the neighborhood and from the apartment. We'd follow up interviews with everybody that we could make contact with in that area.
Was there some point that the defendant was arrested for the death of Sterling?
October 25th.
Why did it take so long?
We didn't have all the information. We were continuing to talk to people. The main concern was that we wanted to make sure that the final ME report was done before we made any decisions about that.
You say the ME, medical
The medical examiner.
So you basically waited for the final autopsy report.
Yes, we did.
Once you received that, you did what then?
Well, we conferred and filed charges and obtained warrants for Zach and Cheyanne.
And what were they charged with?
Murder in the first degree and child endangerment resulting in death.
Now, since that time, you have remained on the case and assisted with things as needed, correct?
Correct.
Okay, I want to go back to Alta Vista a little bit. You said it's a small town.
It is.
You've seen State's Exhibit 37.
I have.
Is that an accurate depiction of an aerial view of the apartment complex where Sterling was at?
Yes, it is.
This time, the state would ask to enter Exhibit 37.
Any objection? No objection. 37 is admitted.
Permission to publish?
Granted.
So I have 37 up on the screen now, and it's probably easier if you stand up and go to the screen.
So this is the east end of Alta Vista. This is the main street that runs east and west through town. This is Weber Street. And then this is literally the end of town. This is at Newfield, the time that this was taken.
And I'm gonna interject here just so we can make sure the record's right. You say this is the end of town, that's the right side of the photograph?
Yeah, the right side of the photograph would be the eastmost edge of the city.
And at the top of the photograph, what is that, Main Street?
This is Weber Street, and that would be like the main east-west road through town.
Where do we see the apartment complexes we've been discussing today?
These three buildings here are the apartment complex.
Within the aqua blue box?
Within this box, yes.
People have talked about pulling up to the apartment in the parking lot. Will you point out where that's at?
There's an alleyway that runs through just the north of the apartment complex, and then these are parking spaces along the north end of that lot there.
The defendant's apartment, which building is it?
It was this building here,
And you're pointing to the building in the center of the three?
the center building of the three buildings, correct?
You said that you had parked a ways away,
Yeah, I ended up parking out here
and out here would be on the
on
what side?
Hilltop, which is the address that was given.
And Hilltop is the right side of the photograph.
Yes, this is Hilltop.
And I'm going to apologize, I'm not for sure if I earlier said left side of the photograph or right side, but when we were talking about the open space. But all of that's on the right side of the photograph, correct?
Correct.
Is there any type of gas station, grocery store, anything like that in town?
Yeah, the AV Express is a convenience store.
Where's that at?
It would be, well, if you walk from the apartments, be a block up to Weber, and then probably another maybe one or block and a half, city blocks further to the west on Weber Street.
So go up to the top of the photograph, take a left, and keep walking for a couple blocks.
Yeah. Where this grade goes through, it's just probably about here. That's where that AV Express would be.
And you were pointing to the top left-hand corner of the
Yes,
photograph.
up in this area.
Not a difficult walk. Have you been in that gas station before?
Many times.
And what's in there?
Miscellaneous food, into your convenience store type stuff, peanut butter and diapers and some basics, milk, eggs, cheese, coffee, most importantly, they have coffee.
How many residents are you aware live in that apartment complex that the defendant lived at?
Well, there are 12 units. Each building has 4 units, and I think at the time there were 11 occupants. It was near capacity.
You had talked about Nala was left with a neighbor.
Yes.
Who's that?
Jennifer Shriver.
Through your investigation, did you learn that that neighbor had babysat for the kids before?
Yes.
That's all I have.
Ross?
Thank you, Your Honor. Deputy Palo, prior to August 30th, 2017, you had never met Randy Harris, is that correct?
That's correct.
You had also never met Mr. Koehn,
That's correct.
and prior to August 30th of 2017, you've never been exposed to people who were in a scenario like Ms. Harris and Mr. Koehn, correct?
Are you referring to Brandy or Cheyenne?
I'm sorry, Cheyenne.
Okay. I'm not sure what you're asking.
Well, you had never been exposed to people who were exactly in that scenario where their children had died, correct?
I have been in similar scenarios in my career.
Okay. Do you recall giving a deposition in this case, Deputy?
Yes?
And, hang on 1 second. I'm just going to grab a copy of your deposition real quickly. Page 14, counsel. Let me ask it this way, Deputy. Do you recall me asking you about whether there was anything inappropriate or unusual about Cheyanne Harris's demeanor that day?
I don't recall specifically the deposition, but I recall her demeanor that day.
If I were to show you a copy of your deposition, would that help refresh your recollection about what you said in the deposition?
Sure, I can take a look at that.
May I approach you?
Yeah.
Counsel, I'm going to refer to page 14, specifically lines 7 through 11. Maybe I'm going to hand you just a transcript of the deposition, page 14, and ask you to read silently to yourself, lines 7 through, I believe, 11.
I guess in context...
Hang on, before you testify, I just need to take
Sure.
a deposition.
Certainly.
Has your recollection about your answer been refreshed?
Yes.
Okay. And now do you recall testifying and then answering my question that you've never been exposed to people who were exactly in that scenario?
To that question, absolutely. This is a unique case. I have dealt with other infant deaths in families and even in the criminal situation.
I believe, as was established on direct examination, you had some conversations with Mr. Koehn, correct?
I did.
And you described him as having a flat affect, right?
Yes, not displaying much emotion.
And that was my next question. A flat affect would be like a monotone voice? Is that accurate?
Yes.
It would be a reduction in emotion?
Yes.
And to you, he seemed like he was in shock. Is that accurate?
He stated he was in shock.
Did you have anything to indicate that he was not in shock?
From a medical standpoint, or just, I'm not sure what you're asking.
Just based on your observations of him and his demeanor that day.
Well, I'm describing what I observed. I don't know if, when we refer to shock, there's a medical definition for shock, and then there's people who are shocked or excited. He made that statement to me, but I guess I wouldn't have observed any of the behaviors or the way he spoke with me as being in shock.
Okay. But he told you that he was in shock.
Correct.
And you would agree that waking up to your finding out that one of your children is dead is a pretty stressful situation.
I can imagine it would be very stressful.
Now, in talking with Mr. Koehn, he told you that he worked nights, correct?
Yes.
And he normally went to work around 6 p.m., is what he told you?
Correct.
And then he worked into the morning hours, right?
Yes.
He also explained to you that at his job, lately they've been short-staffed,
Yes.
and that he had also been working extra hours.
Yes.
I believe that you mentioned that when you asked he and Cheyanne Harris to go to the sheriff's office, Mr. Koehn needed to borrow some money. Is that correct?
He said he did not have enough gas to make it, and I offered some money to assist him.
Did you lend him $10?
I did.
Now, Ms. Timmons asked you about some phone calls that you made, and you said that you contacted DHS. Was that in regard to Nala?
Well, it was two purposes were behind that. One is to report the death and the suspicious death of Sterling, and then the second is out of concern for what do we do with this other child.
And DHS is the Department of Human Services?
That's correct.
Can you briefly describe for the jury what the Department of Human Services role is with regard to children in the state of Iowa?
The Department of Human Services is tasked with fielding reports about child abuse or neglect. They do a number of other things, elder care and other things, but for the purposes of what I end up using DHS for is usually if there's an abuse situation or if you had a concern about abuse or neglect, you'd contact them. They would investigate that, and then they'd make some determinations as to whether the abuse was founded or not. We also use DHS if we need placement or if a child's in an unsafe situation as a law enforcement officer, we can actually do an emergency removal, and we use DHS as a resource to find placements and to get follow-up orders.
Well, one of their jobs is to assist children in the state of Iowa, correct?
Yes,
And also to protect children?
correct.
Switching over now to what you observed in the room where Sterling was found. You said that when you came into the apartment, you observed, you smelled an odor. Was the bedroom where Sterling was found, was the door to that bedroom open or closed?
It was open when I walked in.
And it got stronger as you approached that room?
It seemed to, yes.
And I believe you described that you removed the swing to transport it?
I did.
And were also present at the autopsy?
Yes, I was.
And from your observations, you did not observe anything that you would identify as decomposition, is that correct?
I wouldn't be skilled or trained to be able to identify. As I said in the deposition, I'm not going to call what I saw anything like a medical term. I can describe what I observed.
But you wouldn't have identified anything that you saw as decomposition, correct?
Again, I don't know if that was decomposition or not.
I'm just asking for your opinion. Nothing that you saw, you would identify as decomposition, is that correct?
Well, as I described, the skin was sloughing and indented. There was oozing. There were maggots. When you ask about decomposition, if there's tissue that's removed from the body that these bugs are feeding on, or I'm not in a position, I'm not a medical examiner to be able to call something decomposition or infection or oozing, really disgusting tissue. I guess you're pushing me to try and make a statement that I'm not willing to make.
Okay, well, I'm just asking, based on your experience dealing with death investigations. And I had asked you about this in the deposition, you recall that?
Yes.
And you recall what your answer was?
I don't think I would call anything that I saw decomposition, as in a dead body decomposition.
You also observed insects coming out of the blanket, I believe.
Yes.
Did you see any evidence that the insects were biting, feeding upon Sterling's body?
No.
Just to clarify the term that you used on your direct examination, I believe Deputy Russell uses the term as well. You refer to the ILEA, some folks may not be familiar with that. Can you tell us what that stands for?
Certainly. The Iowa Law Enforcement Academy in Johnston, right by Des Moines, it's the academy that we all are certified by, regardless of where we go to school. But I actually attended the academy at the Iowa Law Enforcement Academy in Johnston.
Thank you, Deputy. I don't have any other questions.
Redirect.
Why wouldn't you describe the defendant's behavior as being in shock?
He was able to respond to questions appropriately. We had a conversation about work. He seemed to be able to communicate effectively. He talked to me about his work schedule. He was able to take out his phone and send me his work schedule. In my experience, someone who's actually really in shock, or clinical shock, like an accident or something like that, those higher level functions are not something I would expect to see a person able to do.
That's all I have.
Recross.
Do you know anything about Mr. Kane's educational background?
We talked a little bit about school, I don't recall. And we went to Mennonite school through, I believe, 8th or 9th grade.
Have you ever heard people use medical terms that are not medical personnel and use them inaccurately?
Yes.
Would you agree with me that people respond to stressful situations in different ways?
Absolutely.
Thank you, that's all I have.
Anything else?
No.
May this witness be excused.
Yes.
Mr.